What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Coffee with Dudes. We got a good one for you today. This podcast is based on another podcast, kind of our thoughts on Joe Rogan's one of his recent podcasts with Jelly Roll. So, to kind of just preface everything, Jelly Roll lost 300 pounds, which is pretty crazy. And a lot of times when people go about that process, you see a lot of like yo-yoing where it's like it's tough to actually keep it off. But going through it, I started listening to it for like 30, 40 minutes. And it's like this, like a lot of the stuff that he's talking about are really, really good things that I think a lot of folks could take and use in there, whether it's for weight loss, fat loss, like health and fitness goals, really anything. And so we wanted to just talk through some of the notes that we each made on this podcast, and hopefully it can help somebody out there with their journey to whatever it is you're going after in health and fitness. And so, what do you think, Matt? What was your kind of first takeaway from this one?
I mean, first of all, props to him for being able to do that. That's not easy. I don't care who you are. I think a lot of people will almost like take it for granted. They're like, oh, he had the like right people around him, or he had the resources because he has money and like things like that. But it's like, no, I don't care who you are. Like that process can be daunting. Like from the jump. If you
Yeah,
don't have a process, if you don't have a plan, and you don't have the willingness to be able to stick to it consistently. So first of all, props to him for being able to do, like, losing 300 pounds is insane, dude. Like, imagine people that lift and listen to this, like picking up 300 pounds, like he was walking around with that, where he was like, there was, specific examples that he was sharing in the podcast where he was like, I wouldn't be able to physically like go hunting, or like, I just couldn't do it. So imagine being out there hunting, just carrying an extra 300 pounds of weight, with you. And not to mention you're rucking stuff anyways. So you're already carrying stuff with you. So like props to him, man, for being able to like just shed that off of his body to be able to really extend his quality of life, bro. Like that's
seriously.
awesome, man. What'd you think? What were your initial thoughts?
There was a lot of good stuff. I was like, oh, I kind of assumed that it was going to be. I didn't know. I had no thoughts because I know I've been hearing about it over the course of the years of like how
Yeah.
he rolls, like getting in a lot better shape, and he's a pretty inspirational guy as it is. Like
Yeah.
some of the podcast was pretty emotional if
Yeah.
you listen to like certain parts of it. But I think one of the big things that I took away right away is he had like a huge why. It was like he kind of felt like I think he said he was coming up on 40, and
Mhm.
he didn't expect to live too much longer, and
Yeah.
he seems like a family man. So it seemed like it was almost about like if he doesn't do it now, like might not ever see, his, 42, 43 is kind of where he was getting to because he was like 500 and some pounds, right? Like that's a large amount of weight where it's got to be difficult walking around
Yeah.
like you were talking about, let alone trying to do other activities. And so he talked about too, I think, something about his daughter, son, his kids, like, and instead of kids at their age, which is like 9, 10 years old, I believe, are wanting to be outside playing, doing fun things, and his only thing that he could really do with them was like sit on the couch and watch movies. And
Yeah.
so it seemed like he had a pretty big reason to finally change, which maybe he didn't have until he had to get up to like a certain weight and needed to change. Otherwise, he's going to die.
Yeah. It's crazy. I think about that as it relates back to my clients too. And like the clients that have the strong why, the ones that have that like literally like deep desire to make change with themselves, not just because it's cool, or not because there's a destination coming up, or like a trip or a vacation or anything like that, but because they have this like, deep desire as to why. Oh, excuse me.
That's
And it like is burning inside of them. They get themselves in this position where like there is no other option, and they make it their only option. Not to be like you have to be psycho about it or anything like that, but when you give yourself no other option and you just like buckle down and you go, this is it. Like I don't care whether I'm gonna not feel like it, I don't care whether like I'm gonna be tempted, I don't care whether all these other things are gonna throw me off track. I'm committed to this. And when you do that and you ditch all the other options, like a couple different things I think come from that is like, one is you're going to realize like, hey, this it's inevitable on this path that I'm gonna scrape my knees during the process. Like it's gonna suck. I'm gonna be faced with challenges. I'm gonna wanna, have crazy cravings. I'm gonna wanna go through all the stuff. But you know what? It's like I think it was who was it? I forget what artist it was, but they were like when they were coming up and it wasn't Jelly Roll, it was a different artist and it was a different podcast, but they said the same thing in terms of on their journey and their progression to be successful in the music industry. They were like, I've literally experienced every single kind of emotion that you can experience going in this journey. And if I was willing to do that, then I knew I would make it. So like all the high highs, the low lows, the getting burned in the industry, the super, winning the Grammys, this riding the roller coaster. Like, and if you're willing to do and accept all of those things, I think it makes it more enjoyable and more process driven, which you and I talk about a lot, versus
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm in this just to get to this end destination. It's like, no, you actually become a different person day by day as you pursue the process, and you evolve into this different person, which you and I both know that's required to be able to get the end result anyways, right? Like you can't
Oh,
just be the same person that you are currently right now. Like Jelly Roll can't be his same person that he is now, just enjoying snacks and instant gratification and only being able to, enjoy his kids by watching movies on the couch. Like, that's his current state. He had to be willing to be like, okay, this is going to suck. I got to change some things. I have to slowly but surely become a different person. I have to act as if a person who walks around 300 pounds less than what I am right
yeah.
now. What would that person do? So it's a crazy mindset, man. And nobody talks about that piece, but the psychology to it, I think, is incredible. So yeah, man, props to him. Good for him.
Yeah, and that made me think of one thing they talked about as well is changing your environment, changing the people you surround yourself with, because he talked about, I think, a quote from his uncle or grandpa or whatever, like you hang around nine, you're going to be the 10th.
Yeah.
If you think about it,
Did
if
you
you
hear
all,
his? Did you hear the quote too, where he's like, "New playground, new playmates"?
here you go. I was trying to remember what it
Yeah,
was. Like,
I wrote it. I wrote it down. I was like, "That's
yeah, there
awesome."
you go. That's I just wrote this down because I wrote it down like long time after,
Yeah,
like an hour after I started listening to it, and he was saying that. But I thought that was a great quote and a great point, right? It's like I'm sure a reason why it took him so long to do it is because it's hard to move into a different environment to set yourself up to where, I think he talked about even at house, like if, he needed to have the food set up differently to where he couldn't have like all of the food that was in the pantry. They had to figure out a way to like get it away from him and get him into a place where he could get into a better relationship with food
yeah,
before he could start introducing those things as well. And I liked how he talked about a few things. So he talked about a lot of like like very small progressions that he made, as opposed to just like making a huge change.
yeah,
And one of those was, I think that like the family would like put out small amounts of these foods that he normally ate to give him like his fix of them early on, to allow, because it's very difficult to go probably from how much food he was eating and how much, shit he was probably eating to nothing, like none at all. And so it's
yeah,
like kind of giving him a little bit. And then he also talked about how initially he reached out to that Gary Brecka guy, which I don't know what I totally think about his.
yeah. That's a
uh,
different thought, huh?
it's
Yeah,
kind of like a
yeah,
little bit aggressive, but he told him to start cold plunging and just walking 10,000 steps a day, which I mean seems to be like a weird requirement for a guy who's 550 pounds. But
yeah,
he's like, I couldn't do 10,000 steps, but I started with like walking down to the mailbox, or like a half mile. I forgot which one he started with, like a half mile
yeah,
a day, or walking down to the mailbox and back, or
yeah,
whatever it is. And that that's how you do it. Like you meet yourself where you're at, and you like start small and start with something you can actually do, so that you don't discourage yourself, but also like so that you don't like just destroy yourself the first week and fall
yeah,
off and go right back to what you were doing, because you're like, this is a lost cause.
yeah,
And so I think that's really important. I loved that, like that part of all of this, where it just, he started small and it seems like he just kept building up, and now he can run, and he's done, he's doing a 10K, and he's talking like he's hunting now, and like all this different stuff.
yeah. He was saying that first 5K that he did, he's like, because he did it with Cam Haynes. It's like if Cam wanted, he could have crawled faster than I was walking. And so it's cool. It's like he just threw himself in the fire, man, and he was just like, I'm not, I'm not going to be good at this. But what he didn't even fully understand, I think, or comprehend like what he was fully getting into. He was just like he took that saying to heart, the new playground, new playmates. It was like, let me
Yep.
just surround myself around like people who do this, who are badasses, and like I'm just going to sign up for. I don't even know what I'm doing. I'm just going to sign up and be in that environment. And then, sure enough, when you hang out with certain people long enough, like you become them. And so, I think he plucked himself out of his current state, hung around people like Cam Haynes, and was like, of course, like they're not going to let you slip, right? Like you're going to be a byproduct of whatever they're doing. They're not going to sacrifice what they've been doing and how they live in their lifestyle for your bad habits, so that you have to basically jump on board with whatever they're doing. And so
Yeah.
like by default you essentially become a part of that community, that culture, that thing. So I think that's awesome, man. Like and that goes for anything too, right? Like put yourself in the environment. I remember the first time when I was like starting to take like CrossFit training seriously. I had always like trained super hard in like a sports performance gym, but it wasn't really like it wasn't designed for CrossFit. It wasn't like, and so I remember doing CrossFit in my garage and like pushing with a couple buddies. But then I remember it was the first time I actually went to like a legitimate CrossFit gym that was run by like a CrossFit Games athlete and like multi-time, and like his gym was super cool and it was super competitive. And I was like, oh, like there's levels to this, dude. Like, and I put myself in that environment, and like each year I was like making leaps and bounds and getting better and better to levels I didn't know I was capable of,
Yeah.
because the guys around me were pushing me like crazy. And it was just like you didn't want to be the odd one out, so you basically became a part of that environment just by being there. And you're like, you become a different person. You're like, oh, there's other levels to achieve than what I thought I could do just in my garage by myself. And so like you see people doing phenomenal things, and like 200 plus pound men like walking on their hands for super far and like doing crazy shit. And you're like, dude, that's possible. Like that's crazy to me. That's insane. And like dudes doing it at like in this case, one of my the our head coach was at the time over 40, like 40 something, so, and he was crushing every single one of us, and we were in our early 20s, early to mid 20s at the time, so it's just like, dude, it opened your eyes when you put yourself in a different environment, for sure. It
Yeah.
just shows you what's possible.
It really is one of the biggest things. And again, like environment comes down to like people, what you have around your surroundings, all that stuff. And I had a few other things in that sense too. One thing I put down here was he talked about taking a reset, because you sometimes you're going to go like in that state. He has huge goals he's trying to strive for, and he finds himself like in the pantry getting ready to like scarf down a bunch of food, right?
Yeah.
And like talking about like, I think he went to therapy and like had worked pretty heavily with people to figure out different strategies to work with, and one of them was like taking a reset, like going out of there, resetting, and then like getting back into to like where like what the goal is. I think that's a huge thing, like taking a step back, not reacting to the world and like the environment, but like actually like consciously getting yourself back into a conscious decision as
Yeah.
well. And so I think that's big. And then one thing he said that I thought was interesting, didn't really have as much to do with the fitness journey. But he talked about like he stops searching for happiness and he starts search to be useful. And I think that
Mm.
was kind of like I'd never really heard somebody say that before, but I was like, that's pretty interesting, because happiness is a very tough thing to search for, right? It's like
Mhm.
it's not necessarily like all the way in our control. Like we can kind of choose to be happy, but I think that's a cool little lens to look at life from.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those things like it can be a trap, right? Like first of all, if you're looking for it, then you are subconsciously telling yourself that happiness is not my current state, or I don't ingrain it into my body, or I don't have that right now. So you're looking for it, you're searching for it, you're like, where is it? So it may be inside of you, and you're just subconsciously telling yourself like, oh, that's not me. I don't associate with happiness. I'm depressed, right? And so like it's this thing that's external from you. And so we're like seeking validation and looking and like searching for it, which then further elicits the problem in the first place, right? It's like, so yeah, that's a tough one. That could be a slippery slope. Um, I like that. I'm a fan of that. I also wrote down here in my notes that when you were talking about like him going into the pantry and like eating that stuff, he also mentioned like he realized that what he put into his body, both physically and mentally, determined his current state. And that's a big one too. That's like, I think sometimes we often think that whether we want to blame it on genetics or we can go back to environment, whether it's just like the people that you're surrounded with. Yes, that does have a huge impact on your current circumstance and state. Obviously, that we just talked about. But when he really mentioned like, dude, the foods that I eat, the drinks that I drink, like, and then he even mentioned like his feed, like on his social media feed too, like what he was looking at. He's like, I was looking at like bar fights and like, all this stuff, all that he was like feeding his soul subconsciously, both shit from a food standpoint and from a fuel standpoint. And then mentally as well, too, psychologically, like the stuff he was just looking at, scrolling through on his feed was just not productive for him or was not
Yeah.
conducive. And it's just like, I think we don't think about that all the time. It's like, yeah, we think about the physical side of things too, but he was like admitted that his mental, like psychological state of the stuff that he was feeding himself was just like garbage.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good point. You toss negativity in there, and then you're going to be negative,
Yeah.
and then like, and if you find like positive things and you feed yourself, the good food most of the time, and things that are maybe like funny or like different things that like actually help you move forward, like feed you positively, it's gonna like you're just gonna naturally be in that state. So that's a really good point as well. And the last thing I wrote down here too was just take the hard road, like do the hard thing first. He talked about like a walk that he would do, and there's this big hill, and that he would just like decide to like take that. And
Mm,
and I know they both talked about this, like Joe and him. Like when you do hard things first in the morning, which is why we work out in the morning, it really makes the day a lot easier for the
yeah.
most part. And so I think that's a huge thing for folks which is why I like doing the workout first thing in the morning. One reason it gets it out of the way, but two, like to get a sweat in and do something hard right away is very beneficial for, your mindset going into the day.
Dude, the rest of the day is a breeze after that, man. Like I love it. It took me a while to transition over to it, and it still sucks, dude. There's still, 5 out of 6 mornings or whatever, like that I'm getting up. I do not want to do it. I still don't. But it's just like something about doing that hard thing, especially to start your day. It feels like you've already dominated and conquered the rest of the day. You're just like, whatever the rest of the day throws at me, like it's all good. I've already conquered the most challenging part. You know. They also mentioned and touched base too on like the importance they were talking about. Joe's big into hunting and getting outdoors, and Jelly Roll's now finally able at a reasonable weight to be able to go with Cam and bow hunt because he couldn't use a rifle, right?
Yeah,
He's a
that's right.
convicted felon, so he technically he could use a bow still, but physically he wasn't able to do it because if being out in the woods and hiking and trekking up and down mountains and hills and stuff, like he physically couldn't do it. But Cam kind of like dropped in his ear that like, hey, you're gonna be able to go hunting with me next year, next season, and so that was part of his incentive as well too. You could probably add that into his why, but they were talking
Mhm.
about just the idea of getting outdoors and like how it just gives you like this kind of like an endorphin high, right? It allows you to, when anytime you're out in the woods or outdoors. That's why I love fishing. It's just like doing any of those things where it allows your mind to just forget about the day-to-day stresses and worries and little small things that we think are so important. And you get out there, and they were talking about, they're like, the mountains don't give a shit. Like they don't care what you're worried about or what you were stressed about, or like, you get out in the woods and outdoors in the world. There's something to be said about it. It's hard to explain, but if you've done it, you probably understand what we're talking about. And they touched on that, and I was like, that's so true. It's like
Yeah.
you just forget about everything.
Well, it's relaxing too. Like being
Yeah,
in nature, being in,
yeah,
a hike or in like the trees and stuff is it's relaxing
yeah.
for sure. So that's good shit though. Any other things that you took away from the podcast? I'm all tapped out of my notes.
Yeah, that was all my. Let me see. Yeah, no, that was it, man. I think the biggest thing is just like giving props and praise to not only just him, but other people that are in a similar situation. They're like not taking no for an answer and being able to just reinvent a new version of themselves. Like you don't have to be with that same version that you're stuck with currently right now. And I think a lot of people are just like, oh well, it is the way that it is, and this is how it's going to be forever. Like if you want to, you truly can change. And so hopefully I know he is, being on that kind of platform, he's going to be, so super, super impactful to other people who have been wanting to make change, but maybe they needed to see somebody like Jelly Roll who is similar to them. If they're like super overweight and need to lose more than just like the 5, 10, 15, 30 pounds that the average person does, like he lost 300. Like that's insane. So yeah, hopefully people look to him for inspiration. I'm sure they do. And I'm glad he's sharing his story on a platform like that, because I think a lot of people need to hear from it. A lot of people can benefit from it.
I agree. And one thing that made me think of actually, to kind of before we wrap up, was he talked about how he was, felt like he was in a big calorie deficit. He couldn't lose any weight. And it turned out like his insulin was extremely high, like his hormones were off, like
Mm.
testosterone was super low. And it goes to show that like getting your blood work done can be very, very beneficial for folks, because you could be doing everything perfectly, as you think you're in a calorie deficit, all this stuff. But if your hormones are fucked up, you're not going to see the results you want, no matter what. Like that's the big thing. So wanted to touch on that just at least quickly before we wrapped up. But hopefully everybody enjoyed this one. And it was a fun one, fun to record. We'll have to do more of this if we find like podcasts and stuff that we can kind of analyze. But if you did enjoy this is a great one to just share with somebody that you love. And right now we're going to switch to a little bit different format. Going forward, just Wednesday, one podcast a week for the time going forward, and we may drop an extra one in here and there, but we'll just try to pour a little bit more into each of those podcasts. And we appreciate you guys every single week watching and listening. And we'll be talking to you soon.